I didn't realize how much of myself I'd given up until my boyfriend thanked me for not being one of those dramatic girls who makes problems out of nothing. We sat at our wobbly kitchen table in the tiny duplex behind a liquor store, eating cheap takeout. I worked nights at a family diner off the highway. Jake, my boyfriend, was a mechanic at a neighborhood garage. He'd show up at the diner on my break with a milkshake and walk me to my car. Back then, I thought that kind of consistency meant safety. The first weird thing came out as a joke. I was getting ready for my friend's birthday at a bowling alley, putting on mascara and my favorite jeans. Jake watched from the couch and said, "Didn't know you needed to get all dressed up for cheap beer and ugly shoes." He smiled when he said it, so I laughed and wiped off some lipstick. After that, little comments started piling up. If I laughed too loud telling a story, he'd roll his eyes and say, "Okay, relax, it wasn't that funny." If I mentioned a male coworker, he'd ask, "Is he the reason you like staying late?" It always sounded half like a joke, half like an accusation. Whenever I pushed back, he called it caring. "I just know how guys think," he'd say. "I'm trying to look out for you." Somehow, that turned his criticism into proof of love. Money slid into the picture next. On paper, we split rent. In real life, anytime he was short this week, because hours got cut or a customer hadn't paid, my tip money covered it. "You're better with cash," he'd tell me. "If I hold it, I blow it." When I finally said I was stressed, he sighed like I'd slapped him. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "Sorry I'm not some rich guy. I thought we were partners." Then he went silent and stared at the TV while I sat there apologizing for bringing it up. Slowly, my whole life rearranged itself around his moods. If he texted that he'd had a rough day at the shop, I rushed through chores and had dinner halfway done before he walked in. I stopped getting late-night pancakes with coworkers because he called it acting single. He almost never raised his voice, and that somehow made it worse. Jake was all heavy sighs and pauses and lines like, "I just feel like you're not hearing me." Every conversation ended with me apologizing for saying the wrong thing. The turning point didn't feel dramatic at all. My manager, Denise, pulled me aside after a Saturday rush and offered me more doubles on weekend nights. "You'll make good money," she said. Instantly, I pictured the overdue power bill and the bald tires on my car. When I told Jake about the extra shifts, the air in the room tightened. "More doubles?" he asked. "So when exactly am I supposed to see my girlfriend?" I explained the money, how it would help us catch up, how we could finally stop borrowing from my mom. I told him I'd still have mornings free, that I'd keep at least one night off. He nodded slowly, like he was being patient. "It just feels like you're choosing work over us," he said. "I keep telling you quality time matters to me, and you still sign up for more shifts." Later that night, as he snored beside me in the dark, I stared at the cracked ceiling and listened to the hum of the fridge. A quiet question finally surfaced, one I couldn't shove down this time. If this was what love looked like, why did I feel like I was disappearing from my own life? The big blow-up started over laundry, which sounds ridiculous even to me. I had just finished a double, and my whole body ached. The hamper was overflowing, and I asked Jake if he could toss in a load since he'd been home all afternoon. He didn't look up from his phone. "I changed the oil on your car this week," he said. "Do I need to clock in at home too?" I reminded him that I'd worked 12 hours and he'd gotten off early. I tried to keep my voice light, but my hands were shaking a little from exhaustion and too much coffee. He finally stood up, real slow. I just feel like you don't appreciate what I do," he said. "You're always keeping score." That was his favorite word lately. Always. I was always tired, always negative, always making him feel like the bad guy. The specifics of any argument disappeared under that blanket word. He went out for a smoke, leaving me alone in the kitchen with a knot in my chest and a pile of dirty clothes. I ended up doing the laundry myself to kill the silence. The next morning, he checked my phone while I was in the shower. He didn't even deny it. When I came out and saw my screen lit up in his hand, my stomach dropped. "Who's Marcus?" he asked. "Line cook," I answered. "The one who covers my breaks sometimes. You've met him." Jake scrolled through the messages, even though they were just shift swaps and dumb memes about burnt toast. You texting him a lot, he said. Feels flirty. It wasn't. But I found myself explaining every emoji like I was in court. By the time I left for my shift, I was somehow apologizing for not keeping better boundaries. I walked into the diner late, eyes puffy, and Denise gave me that look only middle-aged women who have seen everything can give. You good? She asked softly as she handed me an apron. I shrugged it off. Just couples stuff. Things got tighter after that. If I stayed an extra 15 minutes to cash out a big table, Jake blew up my phone. You said you'd be home by 10. Why did your location say you were still at the diner at 10:18? If I forgot to text on my break, he'd greet me at home with cold silence. Those were the worst nights. No yelling, just him sitting on the couch, jaw tight, answering every question with one or two words. When I begged him to tell me what was wrong, he'd sigh. It's fine, I'm just hurt, he'd say. I guess I care more than you do. Then I'd scramble to prove that I cared. Cooking his favorite food, massaging his shoulders, apologizing for making him feel insecure. My world shrank to the size of his moods. I stopped bowling nights with my friends. I turned down Denise's extra shifts because Jake and I need time together. I even skipped my cousin's baby shower out of town because he didn't feel comfortable with me staying overnight. My mom noticed first. She came into the diner one slow afternoon and sat at the counter while I refilled ketchup bottles. Her eyes flicked to the dark circles under mine, the way I flinched when my phone buzzed. Is he good to you? She asked quietly. I pasted on a smile. Yeah, he just worries a lot. She studied me for a long moment, then changed the subject, but I could tell she didn't buy it. The breaking point came on a Sunday. Denise had begged me to cover half a shift. One of the girls had called out, and it was the start of the tourist rush. I texted Jake that I'd be home by 4 instead of 2. We got slammed. A church bus showed up without warning, and the grill backed up. I ended up leaving closer to 5. When I walked through the door, still smelling like hash browns and coffee, Jake was sitting at the table with my open-tip envelope in front of him. My heart dropped. What are you doing? I asked. Rent's due, he said calmly. You know I'm short this week. I figured you wouldn't mind. He'd counted every dollar. My tips from Friday and Saturday were stacked in little piles like evidence. I needed that for the power bill, I said. My voice came out thin. He shrugged. We're a team. My money is your money, right? Isn't that what you keep saying? Except it wasn't his money on the table. It was mine. Something in me snapped, but not loudly. It was this steady, quiet realization, like someone finally turned the lights on. The phone checks, the guilt trips, the way every conversation ended with me apologizing and him taking what he wanted, whether it was time, attention, or cash. He wasn't clumsy or insecure. He was using me. That night, after he fell asleep with my money still in his wallet, I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling again. The same cracks, the same fridge hum, the same stale air. Only this time, there was one clear, stubborn thought beating in my head. I am done. Not screaming, not throwing his stuff out, not some dramatic movie scene, just a decision, solid and cold and certain. If Jake wanted control so badly, I was going to give it to him in the one way he would hate the most, by taking mine back. I didn't leave right away. People like Jake depend on blow-ups. They expect screaming, tears, ultimatums, something they can twist back on you. I wasn't giving him that. I wanted him calm, comfortable, convinced nothing was changing. So I played along. For 3 weeks, I acted exactly how he wanted. I texted updates from work. I rushed home after shifts. I laughed at his jokes, even the mean ones. I let him believe I was settling into the version of me he'd carved out. Meanwhile, I started planning. The first step was money. Every shift, I skimmed off part of my tips and tucked them into an envelope taped inside a cleaning supply box in the diner's back room. I also asked Denise for those extra doubles I'd turned down before. You sure? She asked. Thought your boyfriend didn't like you working that much. I shrugged. He'll deal. She didn't push. She just gave me hours and a quiet nod that told me she understood more than she said. The second step was documents. Jake liked to help with bills, which really meant he wanted to see where every dollar of mine went. So I started rerouting everything. I opened my own checking account at a tiny credit union near the highway, one Jake didn't know existed. My paychecks got switched over. The next time he asked how much I'd made that week, I told him the diner was cutting hours. He didn't question it. He liked believing I depended on him. The third step was getting proof of how things really were, not for court or anything dramatic, just for myself. A reminder in case I ever doubted why I was leaving. One night, when he accused me of acting distant because I'd forgotten to pick up his favorite chips, I hit record on my phone before responding. I kept my voice calm while he lectured me for 10 minutes about commitment and effort and showing up. When he finished, I stopped the recording, labeled it, and emailed it to myself. Hearing his words without the emotion attached was like finally seeing the shape of a shadow that had been following me for years. The final step was choosing my exit. I waited until he picked up an extra Saturday shift at the shop. He'd be gone from 8 to 5, which gave me more than enough time. That morning, I woke up before him and packed one small suitcase in the bathroom. Just clothes, personal papers, and a few sentimental things. Not enough for him to accuse me of cleaning him out, but enough to leave and not look back. Before walking out, I cleaned the kitchen counter and left the rent money he'd borrowed, every dollar of it in a neat stack. Not because I owed him, I didn't, but because I knew exactly how his mind worked. Jake needed to feel like he never lost. I wanted him to get home and think I'd gone to a shift early or run errands. I wanted the confusion to set in slowly, the realization creeping in like cold air. No explanation he could twist. No note he could reinterpret. No scene he could rewrite. I drove straight to my mom's and parked behind her house so Jake wouldn't see my car if he came looking. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into her arms without a single question. We didn't talk until I was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea. "You ready to tell me what happened?" she asked. "For now," I said. "I just need somewhere to breathe." She squeezed my hand. "Then breathe. The rest can wait." But the rest didn't wait long. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Calls, then texts, then long voice messages that swung wildly from confused to angry to panicked. "Where are you? Why would you leave without talking to me? I deserve a conversation. You're being dramatic. You owe me an explanation. Call me, now." I turned the phone face down and let it buzz. Every message sounded like someone padding around in the dark, reaching for a light switch that wasn't there. He didn't know where I was. He didn't know who knew. He didn't know how long I'd been planning. For the first time in our relationship, Jake wasn't in control. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely, beautifully calm. But I wasn't done. Letting him stew was the beginning, not the revenge. The real part was still coming, slow and quiet, exactly the way he'd taught me to live. Only now, it was my turn. Jake always counted on me being the one who broke down first. Silence made him itch. Not knowing made him furious. So I let him sit in it. For 3 full days, I didn't respond. On the 4th morning, after a shift at the diner, I finally listened to his latest voicemail. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was small, shaky, almost meek. "Babe, can we please just talk? I'm sorry. I don't know what I did, but I can fix it. Please." I didn't call back. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I'd spent so long bending myself into shapes to make him comfortable. My revenge wasn't screaming or exposing him. It was leaving him with the one thing he could never tolerate, the consequences of his own behavior. I knew he'd eventually show up somewhere. He wasn't the type to give up. He found me at the diner first. I was wiping down a table when he walked in wearing his work shirt and that "I'm the victim here" expression he saved for public places. He came right up like nothing was wrong. Can we talk outside? He asked. Please. I didn't step back, didn't raise my voice. I just said, no. I'm at work. He blinked, confused, like his brain couldn't process that tiny word coming from me. No? He repeated. Correct? Denise said from behind the counter, arms crossed. She's on the clock. You need to go. Jake looked between us, waiting for me to soften, to smooth things over like I always did. I didn't. He walked out stiff, pride wounded in a way I knew he'd obsess over. That was step 1. Step 2 came 2 days later. He showed up at my mom's. She met him on the porch before he even got to the door. You need to leave her alone, she told him. I just want to talk. No. You want control. She doesn't live here, and even if she did, you're not welcome on this porch. He tried peering past her, like maybe I'd be inside ready to intervene. But I was at work, and even if I weren't, I wouldn't have come out. My mom's voice held steady. You don't get access to her anymore. He left, but he didn't look angry this time. He looked scared. That was new. The messages slowed after that. Less rage, more confusion. Less certainty, more doubt. I could practically feel the gears grinding in his head. What if she's serious? What if she won't come back? What if I don't matter to her anymore? That was the revenge, letting him see the truth he always hid from. He didn't have power over me unless I handed it to him. The final step was quiet and simple. I blocked his number, not in a dramatic ceremony, just a practical decision on a Tuesday morning while sipping coffee at my mom's kitchen table. One tap, and the buzzing stopped. For good. After that, things settled. I got a small room at Denise's sister's place until I found a studio I could afford. I worked doubles for a while, then started saving. I bought new tires. I paid off the power bill myself. My life shrank down to something small but steady, my own. Some nights I'd think about the version of me who apologized for taking up space, the girl who whispered instead of speaking, who asked permission to breathe, who thought love meant shrinking so someone else felt bigger. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't miss her. A month after the breakup, I ran into one of Jake's co-workers at the grocery store. He said Jake hadn't been himself lately. Late on rent, distracted, messing up simple jobs. The garage wrote him up twice. He's kinda spiraling, the coworker said. Don't know what happened. I just nodded. People show you who they are when they think you won't leave. The coworker didn't know what to say to that. He just grabbed his chips and moved on. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't want to ruin Jake's life or see him fail. I just wanted him out of mine. The real victory wasn't watching him fall apart. It was waking up every morning, not worrying who I'd have to become to keep someone else calm. Revenge, it turns out, doesn't always look like payback. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to walk away and let someone finally face themselves without you holding the mirror steady. And for the first time in a long time, my reflection, just mine, felt enough.